That comes as international aid is piling up in Egypt, just over the border from southern Gaza. Egypt and Israel trading blame now over why aid is not getting in. Israel seized control of the Rafah border crossing May 7th as it stepped up its military campaign. It now says it's up to Egypt to reopen the Rafah crossing and allow humanitarian relief into the Gaza Strip. Those comments drew a swift and angry response from Cairo, though, that said Israel was responsible for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and that Israel's military operations in Rafah were the main factor blocking aid. Well, we're going to talk more about the humanitarian situation now in Gaza with Lucile Marbeau, who's a spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross, who's joining me now live from Paris. Lucile, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. What are you hearing from your colleagues about the current situation on the ground?
Well, the situation is bleak, absolutely desperate now, with ongoing hostilities in the east of Rafah, but also in the north, which has triggered, again, massive displacement of populations. An estimate of 450,000 from eastern Rafah. A colleague told me to which point it looked a bit like a ghost city, and who are shifting towards the western outskirts, but where basically they're going to places where there is no infrastructure and no capacity in terms of humanitarian assistance to absorb all these people who have been displaced, and for many of them, many times, and you can imagine are absolutely desperate. But there are also people now moving down from the north. So the humanitarian needs are absolutely immense. And us humanitarian organizations like the International Committee of the Red Cross, we simply do not have the capacities to be able to answer to all the needs. That is food, access to clean water, access to healthcare, even tents. Now people struggle to be able to find tents because many people don't have any more financial resources to even be able to purchase some. And the sanitary conditions are absolutely dire also, and people arriving in places where there isn't even sanitation. So clearly there needs to be assistance coming in some way or the other, because today we cannot simply respond to the needs. I'd like also to mention that the ICRC was able to recently do one thing, which is very important, which is to open a field hospital in Western Rafah with a capacity to treat about 200 patients a day. And this is all the more important that the health infrastructure in Gaza has nearly collapsed. WHO, so the World Health Organization, considers that only 33% of the hospitals in Gaza are today partially functioning. That means that those functioning don't have all the services available to be able both to treat war wounded, but also the patients and, let's say, those who are the secondary victims and who today, for example, chronic diseases, patients with chronic diseases don't receive their treatment anymore. So the opening of this field hospital is very important, with different services for maternity, newborn care, also pediatric care, but also, of course, majorly needed surgical capacities in order to treat the war wounded. But this is only a drop in the ocean, but also a hospital needs supplies, constant supplies, medical supplies, obviously, but also fuel. And my colleagues have been speaking about great shortages today in fuel, which just, again, diminishes the capacity of humanitarian organizations to work in a very complex, volatile, dangerous situation.
Lucile, what's the situation like for your Palestinian colleagues from the Palestine Red Crescent Society? What are you hearing about how they're handling their work in the midst of all this loss?
It has been, the Palestinian Red Crescent has paid a severe toll. There are 17 volunteers who have been killed during their life-saving operations. Of course, they also have families. They are themselves in a fragile situation, as all the Palestinian civilians. And a colleague I spoke with today spoke also about our ICRC colleagues, saying that they are now living under tents and they're still going to work every day. So in the same time, I'd say that they are in the same fragile situation as most as the Palestinian civilians, but they also can have the frustration of not being able to do enough today to meet basically the humanitarian needs of the people they are supposed to serve.
Speaking Tuesday, the Foreign Ministry of Qatar said humanitarian aid has been unable to reach Gaza, and this since May 9th, which is almost a week ago. Have you seen any effect from that on your colleagues who are there in Rafah and making things go from bad to worse?
I don't have specific details on that. It seems that there has been a little bit of assistance coming in, but it's merely not enough. Before the hostilities in Rafah, already the assistance was insufficient. And now it's lowered down again. And that's where we are in a almost mission impossible situation as humanitarian organizations to do our work today. And we remind constantly the parties of their legal obligations. Assistance is not charity. It's a legal obligation to the parties to the conflict to ensure that people have the minimum vital needs provided. But it is also an obligation for Israel as an occupying power. So what we need to see now is, of course, crossings reopening and massive humanitarian assistance getting in.
Lucile, thank you for that. Lucile Marbeau there, the ICRC spokesperson, speaking to me.